Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Southerner's Northern Garden. So it's Christmas Day here in Ohio, and my mom's up and we've been fixing Christmas dinner, getting it ready for later this evening. I am re-uploading my July garden tour because a lot of people requested plant names on it, and so I went through and spent several hours adding plant names to the video. If you see a plant in the video that a name wasn't added to, certainly bring it to my attention with a timestamp and I'll let you know what that plant is. I'd like to introduce my little mother, Nicole. She runs a small boutique, online boutique, so if you're a lady watching this who have leftover Christmas money, feel free to go check out her store. I will link that below. Her little top here came from there, and she's going to tell you a little more about it.
Hey y'all, I run Chloe's Glamour Style Boutique. It's an online boutique only. We sell all sizes, small through 3X. Ladies clothing, shoes, accessories. We're running a sale today, 30% off the whole entire site. So you can, when you check out, you can just use the code Christmas 30 in all capital letters.
When does it end?
It will end tonight at 12 o'clock.
All right, so I'm going to try and get this video up before dinner. So if you're watching this tonight and you want to check out the store and get 30% off any of the items in the store, go check it out. But let's start the garden tour. Take care, everyone. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Southerner's Northern Garden. Happy July 4th, and welcome to the July garden tour. So since my last garden tour, the hydrangeas have started blooming. The last garden tour has been watched 11,000 times, and now I have 1,000 subscribers. So I can't thank you all enough for liking and subscribing to my channel so I can show you my beautiful garden. So we're just going to begin today at what is quite honestly the most beautiful part of my garden, my hydrangea hedge on the northwest side of my house. This garden tour may be a little longer than the last one. I had lots of questions about what certain plants were in my garden, so I'm going to try and go over every plant in my garden and give you the name to the extent that I remember it. Let's get started, everyone. We have the Proven Winners 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 hedge here. These are 3 years old. They've been in the garden 3 years. This is by far their best year. If I had this to do over, I would have placed them back a little further beside the emerald green 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲. I did bring them a little forward because I thought they would get much bigger, and they will, but they don't tend to grow very far back because they get more sun this way. So planting them a little more forward would have given them a little more room to fill the space. Here we have the clematis by Proven Winners, known as Stand By Me. It's beautiful this time of the season. It is starting to produce its seed heads, which are really pretty as well. And we'll just continue on this way, and I will show you the imposter daylilies. So actually here is one of them, and this one is actually gorgeous, and it is the second replacement that they sent me, and it looks close enough to the Salome Double Classic that I actually like the way it looks. This is the regular Salome Double Classic, and this is what I was sent. It looks very, very similar, but it has this very interesting white stripe down the middle, which is quite honestly very beautiful. So I'm keeping those in there, but this is the imposter daylily, which completely clashes with everything else around here, and those I pull up individually as I see them, which has been a pain with this many daylilies, but I've done it over the past couple years, and I'm going to continue that. So as you can see, because this hedge is northwest facing, everything tends to get bigger down this side, and then it slowly gets smaller down there, and the daylilies also bloom in that order too. So they're opening up here first, and then they're slowly starting to open down there on the end. We'll continue on this way. I have this clematis. I do not know the name of this clematis. It's buried down there on a tag somewhere. And buried under the clematis is an At Last rose by Proven Winners. My roses got pretty eat up this season. Very early, I didn't catch it in time, so some of them are looking pretty bad. We have this Glow Girl spirea here that overwintered in my zone. It's done well in this ceramic frost-resistant pot I have. Below here, I have the lemon coral sedum that I've bragged about on my channel. I actually bring these in winter, and I've heard mixed results that it will survive in zone 6 because it is a sedum, but I'm not willing to risk it. I love bringing it in. It looks very poor by the time spring rolls around, but I bring it out and give it some Osmocote, and it just explodes. So those have been out here a couple months now. This is an Olivia Alston rose, which I planted bare root a couple months ago, so it is new to this bed. This is a continuation of the emerald green arborvitae. And then here are some of my favorite hydrangeas ever. This is Bobo. They stay around 4 foot tall, 4 foot wide. They're one of the smaller paniculata hydrangeas, which is nice if you have a small space, but you want something that produces a ton of blooms. It is one of the most floriferous hydrangeas that is available on the market. And you can just see how many blooms it is producing there. Below there, I have Supertunia bubblegum, which I haven't been super impressed with how they are doing in the landscape, but it looks like they're finally picking up. It could be the clay soil in this bed. We can continue this way. This is a variety of Rudbeckia I got from Floret Flower. It is called Denver. I picked these seeds up in January or February when they had their seed sale very early before they sold out. And so I have a couple of the Rudbeckia varieties. They're just annuals. They will not come back next year as a result. So this is my beloved Limelight Hydrangea Standard. I have 2 of them. I have another one down there on the other side of the patio. This one was replaced because of the clay soil that I had. Limelights are one of the slowest to bloom, and so it has not yet started producing flower heads yet. In fact, all the other paniculatas in my garden are producing flower heads except this one. So it's still got a little bit to go, but it should start anytime now. So below the Limelight, I have Cat Mint, which needs to be cut back. This is the Cat's Pajamas variety by Proven Winners. And then I have a blueberry. I've mentioned before that my soil is very alkaline, and this blueberry is not thriving. So I'm going to end up pulling these up in the fall and putting them in a Vigo garden bed I have on order that should arrive in August. That way I can control the acidity of the soil a little better. So there's one on both sides. They'll both come out, and I will probably replace them with a boxwood or some other type of evergreen here just to provide a little more evergreen interest. That's something I need to work on in my garden. I do have the emerald green arborvitae here, but there needs to be a little more in this corner, I think. So probably a boxwood would be a good example. The sprinters have done wonderful in my garden, so if I can find any of those, I may stick one there. This is a storm cloud Amsonia. It produces beautiful blue, light blue blooms in very, very early spring. It's one of the first things to bloom in the garden, and it's just a nice foliage interest for the rest of the season. It doesn't bloom again. This rose is new this year. The rose that I put in this location also died from the clay soil last year. This is Charles Darwin. It's the same rose that I was going to have in this location. It's supposed to be yellow and almost thornless. However, it's looking a little pink, so I'm hoping I didn't get the wrong rose again. That seems to be something that happens quite frequently to me for some reason. This is a Sunjoy Gold Pillar Barberry. I really like it because it has a very upright habit. Now, barberries do have thorns, so you have to watch for that. But I picked this up as a 4-inch container last February and put it in the ground, and this is how much growth it's put on in 1 year. So they're quite fast growing if you need something fast growing. Even if you need to deter pests, the thorns are great for that reason. I wouldn't recommend planting them next to a sidewalk, simply because if they get too big, then you're going to be walking through thorns. This is a pink lemonade Baptisia. It also blooms very early spring, but it is bloomed out for the season and will not produce blooms again. However, the foliage is super nice the rest of the season, and this plant is only 1 year old. When you pick them up from the garden center, they may only have 1 or 2 bloom stalks, and they don't look like they're going to do much. But let me tell you, this thing filled this space in a year, and I just love the foliage interest it provides on each side of this opening to the stairway to our patio. So for my last garden tour, this flower bed was the most watched segment of the video. And it's super interesting to me because everything in this flower bed is 1 year old except for the few varieties that I added this year. The Willow itself is 3 years old. I actually brought that home in my SUV 3 years ago, and it has gotten that big in 3 years, so that'll give you an indication of how quickly a willow will grow. That willow specifically is called Prairie Cascade. It's supposed to get, in our zone it said 25 by 25. I've been looking online and it says it could get quite larger, which concerns me. But considering I picked it up locally, I'm hoping the label at our garden center was correct and that it will only get about 25 by 25, and it'll stay smaller because if it gets much bigger, it's going to outgrow this area extremely quickly. So, if you've been watching my channel, you know that I'm having a fence installed here. So a lot of these shrubs from here back, I don't know if you can see the oak leaf hydrangea I put in back there. There is a stake next to it, so where I'm standing, the fence will go right through. So all of these daylilies, which I'm going to show you briefly, will have to be removed to other parts of the garden. So let's just take a look at some of these varieties. I do have all of them labeled. At one point I thought about becoming like a daylily breeder on the side just as a hobby. I'm not sure if I want to do that now, but I have some very interesting varieties that I picked up from Smokey's Gardens. A lot of them are very similar looking. I do love pinks. Not all of them are blooming today. This one's going to be a beautiful purple. This one's called Little Rainbow, and it's a very interesting color. We have pink puff. This one is unlike any of the others in my garden. Let's see if I can find the name down there. Sun and Shade. So I do have these little tags that I picked up from Target, which is a great way to label things in your garden that you need to remember, especially the daylilies. This is another one of my favorite. It's called Carved Initials. And then here's one more called Chili Sprinkled. All of them came from Smokey's Gardens. So this is a perennial geranium I grew from seed down here. And it is going to be cut back severely after this video in the coming week, because it has just overtaken this area, and it will also have to be removed as part of the fence going in. So I'm just going to go ahead and shear it back, see if I can get some rebloom out of it. And then when the fence is put in, I will pull these things out. I may stick them in pots until I find somewhere else to put them in the garden, or I may transplant them directly. I'll bring you along when I do that and show you the process. This is a Winecraft Black Smoke Bush by Proven Winners. I really, really love this foliage in the garden. Some smoke bushes get super big. This one's only supposed to get 4 to 6 foot tall and wide. And it is great in cut flower arrangements. I did get it as a 2-gallon last year, and it is much smaller and growing much slower than I expected it to. So we'll see how that comes along. It may be a little shaded from this willow for part of the day, and then I may have to move it later as this willow gets bigger and takes over more space. But we'll see how that goes on in the next year or so. So here I have cherry chocolate hibiscus. Hibiscuses are not quite blooming yet in my area, but it is just loaded up with buds. So this is a 1-year plant as well. It's a bit splayed out because the willows, it's trying to reach for the sun. So there are 2, there's one here and one there, and they're just going to put on a show here in a few more weeks. This is a totem pole grass. It will get 5 foot, 6 foot tall or so, and adds a nice little blue foliage interest. Below it I have some peonies. I'm not sure of the variety. They come from Costco as perennial bare roots, and I just planted them there, and we'll see how they do. This year they put on a couple blooms. It wasn't very sturdy blooms, so I'll give them another year. Peonies aren't my favorite plant, but they do have nice foliage for the rest of the season and kind of fill the space for me. This is Cheyenne Spirit Coneflower. I am getting some more coneflowers coming up. Coneflower readily reseeds, which is nice if you like coneflower, and I do. So I also have one back there. You can kind of see it on the ground there. So I'm going to leave those and let them grow up and see what color they are. Cheyenne Spirit is either orange, yellow, or red. I don't love red flowers in my garden. I like red foliage, but I'm leaving these because they're quite honestly a nice pop of color that I don't have elsewhere in the garden. Below that, I have more of the cat's pajamas 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲, which circles this limelight hydrangea here. And I also have a black mondo grass here, which is very tiny. I got plugs. It'll be a nice black strappy foliage and will contrast nicely with these purple blooms when it gets a little bigger. I just picked up Peach Sky Yarrow from my big box store the other day. I've been looking for it. It wasn't available in our market last year at our big box store. Sunshine was, I believe, which is the yellow variety. But I really love this color because it comes out orange and then it kind of transitions to a yellow. And orange and yellow is some of the favorite colors in my garden. So as I mentioned, this is the limelight hydrangea. In my last tour, it wasn't doing the best, but it has grown significantly. So I'm going to leave it in its place. It was kind of giving me vibes that it may not live, but it's recovering quite nicely, and it's actually putting on blooms earlier than the Limelight Hydrangea standards around the patio, so that's nice. Here we have alliums. This is the Millennium allium. They produce very nice purple seed heads, which you'll see in the front of my house. I have some more up there. I love these because they have a nice foliage. The bees actually cover them up. It's a great pollinator plant. And right behind them, I have a rose by David Austin. I believe the name is Pegasus. This was supposed to be an Olivia Austin rose, and David Austin sent me the wrong rose here as well. So we will see how that turns out. It has very beautiful orange flowers on it. It doesn't tend to hold the flowers very upright on its stem. So I'm going to give it another year, see how it grows, and then if I don't like it, I may remove it and dispose of it. So this is once again the cherry chocolate hibiscus here, the second one. This is a bicolor butterfly bush. I picked it up last year as a 1-gallon shrub. It didn't do much. I never saw the bicolor in it. This year I'm also not seeing any bicolor yet. So the blooms are supposed to originate this color and change more of like an orange color and then go to purple. But it's not doing that for me, and I don't know if it's my soil or my zone or what it might be, but it's not a bad looking shrub, so I'm going to leave it until this willow takes it over and I have to move it elsewhere. As I mentioned several times on my channel, this is one of my absolute favorite shrubs. This is a proudberry quarrelberry. It was a 4-inch container last February, so this will give you an idea of how big this shrub will get. It's roughly 2.5 foot wide by 3.5 foot tall. The blooms are insignificant, but it produces very beautiful, large pink berries that look great in arrangements and just great in the garden, that give the birds something to eat on in late fall and winter. I have some perennial geraniums below here. I do not know the name of these, but they bloom a blue flower and they come from Costco. So I picked these up as bare roots from Costco. And they bring an excellent color to here. I don't know if they will rebloom. I might need to shear them back to get them to rebloom a little bit, but we'll give them a little more time first. There's a Tranquility David Austin rose behind here, which has beautiful flowers. I'm not a huge fan, surprisingly, of white roses. I love the thought of white roses, but because I have a sprinkler system, when they get hit by water, the blooms immediately look awful. So I'm keeping it in its place like the other things to see how it does, and if I can catch the blooms at the right time and cut them and bring them inside, they're beautiful, but otherwise they kind of look awful on the shrub itself after water hits them or it gets any rain. Here we have a 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲, which is just grown from seed, just a generic variety I got picked up online. This daylily is called Nicole's Drama Queen, and it is a gorgeous yellow and ruffly color that you don't see very often. This one comes from Smokey's Daylilies as well. We have a catmint, an unknown name variety that I had picked up as one of the first plants I had ever put in my garden. It was originally under the magnolia tree in the front, and when as the magnolia's grown up, it was cutting out more light and they were not loving it. So I moved them back here and they're doing quite well now. These are Pinky Winky hydrangeas. Pinky Winky is one of the most beautiful hydrangeas available. They have huge blooms on them. Some of them can be up to 1.5 feet long when the plant is very well established. The blooms are more open, you can see, so they're great for pollinators. And it's just now getting started. It was one of the earlier blooming paniculatas, hydrangeas in my garden, so it's looking great. Here we have Daisy May daisies. Daisy May does not do great in my clay soil. If you have clay soil and you have a good job or a great record with Daisy May, please let me know. I will probably be removing these in fall because every year they do this. Even though these are one year old, every year they slowly but surely die, depending on how much water they get, and then they look awful. So Behind that, I have Midnight Masquerade Penstemon, which is completely bloomed out, but the seed heads are really gorgeous. So I leave them on the flowers through August, and you can put them in dried flower arrangements. So below, I planted a row of zinnias because after these daisy mays bloom out, I will have some color here. Actually, when I remove these daisies, I'm thinking about doing something that's known as cloud pruning. I want to put some evergreen interest in this bed, so I may put several tiny boxwoods in here, and then you kind of let the boxwoods grow together and you prune them so they look like clouds. So that'll be interesting and add some nice winter interest in this area, because that's one thing that is not in this bed at all. I have no evergreen, so in the winter everything completely dies down and it looks, there's just nothing to look at. So I've got to work on that in this bed. Here I have Festival Star, which is basically a baby's breath. I purchased it solely to use in arrangements. That's one thing in my garden that you will notice. A lot of the things and flowers I purchase, sometimes I only have one of them, and that's simply because it looks like a great cut flower and I want to use it in arrangements throughout the season. We have an iris here. I don't know the name of it. Also came from Costco. And this is Liatris, also commonly known as gay feather. It is just now opening, and the pollinators absolutely love this. You can see the bees are all over it here maybe. This Liatris, if you buy it in the store per plant, $10, $15. I got 60 bulbs or corms of Liatris for $15 at Costco, and created this beautiful drift of Liatris that you would have spent a fortune otherwise getting. So behind there, which you can barely see, is some more Gaura, which is bloomed out. I need to come by and cut that down, and then it'll produce some more blooms for the season. And then here we have Nephophia, which has bloomed out, and I cut the bloom stalks down. It's actually not doing great. So when I showed it in my last garden tour, it was very vigorous, and I'm getting a lot of dieback, and I'm not exactly sure why in this area. These will stay here, but here's where the fence is going to come, basically right here. So I haven't done anything to this area of the garden. I may just stick some sunflowers in there. It's kind of weedy right now. The perennials that I planted back here, if you're interested in them, last year, I grew this Mesa Peach Gaillardia from seed, and it is a huge pollinator attractor and looks excellent. It did not come back very good. So everything in this bed was Gaillardia, and I only had a few plants return. So I am just I may move those elsewhere in my garden when the fence comes through. As an update to my Gatsby Star Hydrangea, it's getting some pink coloration. It's doing quite well. I'm not watering it a ton back here, which is what I expected. We've had quite a lot of rain recently. I just love the florets on this flower. Before we continue, I will show you my Rising Sun Redbud. It has got a little burnt. I didn't get in the ground in time, but this tree was planted in honor of a pet I lost in March. And so I've got a little stone I'm going to put below there with his name on it, and this bed will continue out here to the fence line. I'll just discuss that briefly. So this garden tour will not look the same as next garden tour in August or towards the end of July. As soon as this garden tour is over in another week or so, I have a lot of cardboard, and I'm going to bring the cardboard in and completely cover this area with cardboard and mulch on the top of it, because I want to prepare this area for planting, and I want this grass to be killed off. So a lot of people do not love the no-dig method. I have found it's been very beneficial, and I actually have another bed over here I'll show you that I use the no-dig method on. You essentially lay down cardboard, wet the cardboard, and put inches of mulch on top of it. And typically you do not plant in that bed for several months to allow the cardboard to break down and the grass to die off. But I have planted in it immediately. It's a little more difficult and takes a little longer to do, but it also is a great method if you don't want to remove sod. So I will bring you along for that process, but that just gives you an indication of where I'm going with this bed. The bed line will continue this way and go across to the fence, which will be slight right here. And so all of this will be flower bed, and then I'll find some plants to put in there, either pick some out from the plants I'm growing on in containers and potting up, or purchasing some new ones and filling this space so it'll just be a beautiful flower bed. So this area around the maple I haven't shown a whole lot. I got my boxwood in the ground. These are winter green boxwoods. It's an older variety, but I got them very cheaply 2 years ago. And the winter of 2019-2020, they had very significant die-off, and so I pulled them out of the ground. They were up there near the vegetable garden. I'll show you. I replaced them with sprinter boxwoods. I pulled these out of the ground. Some were significantly dead, and I put them back there in my mini orchard and made sure they were sufficiently watered, and some of them came back great. So some of them are smaller than others, but I'm gonna have a nice little boxwood. I don't think I'll do a hedge here, but I'm gonna keep them very tightly in spheres. And so I planted a rainbow of zinnias around right behind the boxwood, and that's more liatris, which the pollinators love. This variety right here is a Russian sage known as denim and lace. I will be removing that and moving it elsewhere in the season in the fall. It does not like this area for whatever reason. It may be too much water. It does not do great at all. That's about as big as it gets all season, and I've not seen blooms on it since I put it in the ground. And it's almost 2 years old, I think. So that gives you an indication of how Russian sage may do in clay soil. I'm going to try and move it to a garden bed that's a little hotter and receives less water and see how it does. I want to quickly show y'all and provide you an update on the Vigo garden bed that I'm growing almost 30 dahlias in. So if you're not following along for that, certainly subscribe. It's going to be a beautiful show of color. I actually have my first dahlia bloom that is just now opening, many more to come. This variety, I don't know what it is. I would have to look. This is one of the ones that I have from my 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 𝗦𝘂𝗯𝘀𝗰𝗿 mix from Eden Brothers. But I've got buds on a number of dahlias here. I ended up having 2 that did not come up. One of those was from Eden Brothers from the same mix, 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 𝗦𝘂𝗯𝘀𝗰𝗿, and then Cornell bronze, which I got from the flower hat, did not come up either. So I will either have to purchase that one again for next year, come at the end of the season, or find a different variety that I like better. But I'm really about to have a show going on out here, which is great. Out here I have various vegetables I have never grown in the ground before. So we have some zucchini down here. I have tomatoes, which I am just currently letting them go on their own. I'm not providing anything but this simple tomato cage. And because I have landscaping fabric down here, I'm just gonna let them sprawl out and see what they would do naturally without any support. And right now I have quite a number of tomatoes on here, but I have nowhere near any ripe tomatoes yet. This is blueberry cherry, which is one of my favorites. It'll be a nice comparison to see how they do here versus how they will do in my raised bed vegetable garden. I do have some Chicago hardy figs. I had a lot of dieback from last year's growth, but they are putting on a lot of growth very quickly. And I'm actually starting to see that I might be getting some figs here in these armpits of this new growth here. So that's very exciting. I love figs. If you've never had a fig freshly picked from the tree, you're missing out. I'll pick up right here on the other side of the patio. Everything in this side of the bed is the same. We've got the blueberries, the bobo hydrangea, the baptisia, and this daylily is not over there. I do not have the name of this daylily. It is actually from a local daylily breeder, and it has beautiful flowers, but he recently retired and had a going out of business sale, basically selling all of his favorite daylilies. So it was very nice to go walk out there to a daylily field and pick out whatever varieties I wanted. This is the Poet's Wife Rose. It's putting on some new buds, but it's pretty much spent for the season. And it will come back in the fall with some new growth. It's putting on some new growth now, so we'll be getting some new buds here in another month or two. Another limelight hydrangea. This is Fall in Love Sweetly Anemone, so it will start blooming maybe in another 2 months. It's a new perennial in my garden as of last year. I did not get any blooms out of it. I had some issues with the plant in general. almost died completely back, and now it's coming back pretty well, but it has beautiful pink blooms, and I'll show you that in another garden tour later in the season. Behind the Limelight Hydrangea, I have a short row of forgotten sage, which is a beautiful accent plant for your garden. It is semi-evergreen and is very easy to propagate. You just cut it off and stick it in some soil with some rooting hormone, and you can create a nice hedge of forgotten sage. It's very similar to lamb's ear. It looks very similar, but it also does very well in cut flower arrangements. Around this new fountain, which I'm absolutely loving, is 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 𝗦𝘂𝗯𝘀. I picked out this shrub specifically because it stays very small, and I thought it would look great under this fountain, but I'm having some issues because the water from the fountain splashes so much. The foliage doesn't love the water splashing, so I'm getting some issues there. It could be transplant shock. I'm not going to move these yet. I think I will give them till next year to see how they do, and if they continually do not like this space, I will move them next year. These are boom chakalaka geraniums. They are a beautiful blue flower. And then we have a grass down here. It's called Northern Lights. It gets a little bit of a pink tinge to it later in the season. These are geums, which are not doing a whole lot yet. They were tiny, tiny plants I got. And this is back to the fuchsia salvia, which I had cut back after I planted it, and I'm just now getting some rebloom out of that. Behind here, I have a black lace elderberry, which is doing okay after I transplanted it. I think it's not loving the clay soil as much either. I'm going to give it a chance to recover and see if it likes this space anymore in a few months. This is a pucker up dogwood, which I love. The foliage is amazing. The blooms are insignificant. And then if you remember the shrub I picked up from Hertz Gardens early spring, it was a Zuzu cherry tree bush, basically. Beautiful, beautiful, huge double pink flowers in the early spring. This is how big it's gotten. This is my hand for comparison. So it has put on a lot of growth, especially since I got it in the ground. The bubblegum supertunias are not loving my clay soil either, I don't think. They haven't been in the ground too long, so I'm gonna give them a little longer. They're starting to put on a few more blooms. I think they just, now we're getting consistent heat. If we stop getting so much rain, I think they will push along quite well. I did try Supertunia Bordeaux in the ground as well, and they're not even looking any better than the bubblegum. So we'll give them a chance. I've never grown Supertunias in the ground, but we'll see how they do. This rose right here is a David Austin Lady of Shalott. It is a beautiful orange rose. And then we have a row of rosemary, which is called Prime, and it's a proven winner's variety. It's supposed to be hardy in my zone, so we'll see if it comes back next year. And since the last garden tour, I have put in this little walking path that has within it dwarf mondo grass. So dwarf mondo grass stays very small and is a clumping grass that is just a great accent plant if you've never seen it. These look a little rough because I just planted them, and I also purchased them and had them arrive I think they were January or February this year, and so I kept them inside for a long time, and they sat outside in their containers for several months before I got them in the ground. But they're a nice evergreen as well in a lot of zones, so that'll be a nice little plant to have here and just some interest in the winter. The walking path is new. I will put in some footage from the place we got it from. This walking path cost me less than $40. I actually went, and these are the only stones they had left. So if you're interested in creating a stone walking path, go check out your local stone building supply place and see if they have anything on sale. It wasn't necessarily clearance, but it was the only thing left on the pallet, and they voluntarily gave me a 50% off discount. And so normally these would have been $6 a piece, and I think I got them for around $2.50 a piece. So it ended up being very cheap to do, and I think it looks great. I just needed something simple to access my earth boxes, which I showed in a video recently. To go over them briefly, I have garlic chives, and this was a tricolor sage at one point. It has lost all its variegation since that point. I just planted some sparkling rose verbena and some black potato vine. I think the variety is called Raven. In here we have, this may be marjoram. I don't know the name of this plant specifically, but it's very nice. And then we have lemon thyme, regular thyme, and this whole thing is filled with oregano. And this is why you put oregano in a container, because it will take over. This is a calendula that came back from being self-seeded. We have the Proven Winners Hot and Heavy peppers and a weed. This is a geranium I grew from seed, and these are bushel and berry raspberry shortcake raspberries, which are delicious if you've never had them. I haven't gotten any ripe raspberries off it recently, and I think I have an intruder. I'm gonna have to work on that, but they are delicious. Coming in the vegetable garden, which I've cleaned up slightly, but there's still stuff in here that needs to be cleaned up and planted. This is Baby Cake's blackberries from bushel and berry as well. I love the bushel and berry variety of berries because they stay very tiny and you can plant them in containers very easily if you don't have locations to plant them in the ground. And because I do not have great soil, I choose to plant a lot of stuff in containers, especially berries and that such. That's one of the reasons I'm moving my blueberries to containers, just because our soil is so alkaline and the blueberries just don't do well in the ground here. So we have lots of peppers here. These are all in my earth boxes, as I mentioned in my earth box video. Various jalapenos, 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲, which is this long, great snacking pepper. And all of these are bell peppers. I have some huge bell peppers ready. More bell peppers, more bell peppers. I'm telling you, the peppers love to be planted closely in these earth boxes and do very great. We have lots of kale here. Dill, I let dill go to seed. Never let dill go to seed. It is everywhere. I've got to come pull it out. I started the process the other day and there's just too much to do. This is my tomato cattle panel trellis, and I'm getting lots of tomatoes on here. They need to be retied to the trellis, possibly pruned up a little bit. I don't prune on my tomatoes a whole lot. I haven't found it to be as necessary in my area. They tend to get a lot of airflow simply because the wind blows this direction and keeps them pretty healthy even late in the season. But I do keep them tied to this trellis, which I will need to do tomorrow likely, because we've got some rogue limbs over here. I showed you this honeysuckle in the last garden tour, and it was eat up with aphids. I treated it with some neem oil and pyrethrin, which is an organic version of permethrin made from a flower, chrysanthemum, I believe is the name of it. But it has come back with a vengeance, and it is glorious right here on the arbor to my vegetable garden. It does need to have a little training done to it. I did cut out some of the bottom because it was completely covering this boxwood, and so I've got to get after that a little bit and just straighten it up a little bit this week and keep an eye on it and make sure we have no more aphid problems. But since the aphids have gone, you can see actually all the blooms back here where they were eating on the foliage. It has just done great. So below my tomatoes, I have planted some calendula and marigolds that had self-seeded in my garden. I love self-seeded calendulas because you never know what color you're gonna get. So like this one's more yellow, this one's an orange, almost variegated bloom. And then we have almost like, look at this one, it's white with pink edges or orange edges. Just something you don't get if you buy calendula from seed from your local garden center or online. So as I mentioned, these boxwoods right here were wintergreen. Those are the ones I replaced in the around the maple down there. These are sprinter. The sprinters have done excellently. These were actually 4-inch containers last year, so that'll give you an indication of how quickly sprinter boxwoods will grow, because these were super tiny and just the 4-inch containers that annuals would come in. And you can see how big those have gotten. And I just want a nice, tight, low hedge around my vegetable garden. I think it'll be very lovely. And that's it. So if you want an idea of how different sprinters look from winter green, this is sprinter boxwood, and this is a wintergreen boxwood. These happen to do okay and didn't have any winter die-off, and so I left them in place. And all of these were replaced. So they look so similar, so if you have a dying boxwood hedge and you need to replace one of them in it, that will fill in quickly. The Sprinter's a good option, and it looks so close enough to the wintergreen or winter gem that I don't think you would notice. I have some sweet peas here that I could pick. More calendula. This is a Mazel basil, which is a great basil that the flavor does not change if you forget to pinch back the flowers. Like here's one that needs to be pinched back. I have a hard time keeping up on my basil. This thing gets massive. By the end of the season, it will be a bush that's 3 foot tall and 3 foot wide. It's insane how quickly it grows and how big it gets. So here we have another Bobo hydrangea, more liatris that probably needs to be removed because it is absolutely growing into the yard. I didn't realize it would get this big. We have a Boscobel rose that got obliterated by bugs that's since been treated and is doing better. The hydrangea behind that is known as Zinfandel. Last year, Zinfandel did not do great at all, and I considered removing it completely. This year, it's doing much better and has put on way more growth. Zinfandel is a smaller hydrangea. It still gets around 5 foot tall, 5 foot wide, but the blooms turn a very beautiful pink color, like an ombre. And so I'm hoping it does really great this year. One of the problems is this is the south-facing side of the house. It stays very dry and it's hard to keep any of these plants in this area enough water. So one of the things you'll notice that I've started doing is adding drought-tolerant plants simply because they can handle it. But the hydrangeas this year, now that they've had a year in the ground, are doing very good. So this was I believe a 1 quart or 3/4 gallon shrub that I bought from Amazon when they had a sale. I think it's been here 2 years. So all of the hydrangeas on this side of the house have been here 2 years. This is the Check Smart Trilogy that I showed you in a previous video. It's completely bloomed out, of course, but it's still a nice shrub, and it's putting on a lot of new growth to thicken up here, and it'll look even better next year if our winters cooperate. So I think this lavender I mentioned in a prior video, I wasn't sure what it's called. I believe it's the Munstead variety. Don't hold me to it. I can't be sure because I don't remember exactly the plant label. It was one of the first things I put in my garden and was transplanted to this area. It didn't live here originally, but it's because it got way bigger than I expected it to. We have another Check Smart Trilogy 𝗟𝗂𝗲 here. This is a lavender as well, but it is variegated. I believe the variety name is called Platinum Blonde. It's beautiful, and if you've never seen it in a garden center, certainly pick it up. The blooms aren't the greatest. They're kind of they're a purple, but they're very washed out purple. They're not a bright purple, so I don't love it for its blooms. I love it for its foliage. This is a red yarrow that is becoming a thug. It spreads very quickly. I haven't pulled any of it up this year, but I might consider it here soon. This is a Pugster amethyst butterfly bush. It has gorgeous blooms for a butterfly bush. This is about its maximum size. It's already 2 or 3 years old in my garden, so that's pretty much about as big as it's gonna get. And it is just beautiful. I cut it back very late winter, very early spring, after I see what growth it's gonna put on. And it comes back beautiful every year and produces these gorgeous blooms. This year the blooms are huge. In previous years they've not been this big. So just give your butterfly bush a couple years if you have one of these varieties, and it will be putting off huge blooms for you. These also work pretty good in arrangements. If you've never tried, they don't last extremely long, but they're a good accent. Back here we have another daylily that I picked up from the daylily grower I mentioned earlier. So there's not a name to this. This is one he bred himself. And then this is the mini Malvet hydrangea. These were moved here last year after I created the Invincible Ruby hydrangea up front. And I moved them in the middle of the season, probably in like August. And then they got hit with this extreme sun on this side of the house, and they did not love it, and a lot of them died completely down to the ground. So I've got this one right here, and then I've got one more over there. But they're coming back really great this year, so it makes me get really excited. I have a standard coneflower here. I think that one's called Powwow. This is a quick fire hydrangea, which is one of the first paniculata hydrangeas to bloom in the season. It is just now starting to get some color. It attracts a ton of pollinators because of its very open blooms, And it's a very beautiful hydrangea if you want something to bloom really early, and then it gets this nice rosy color to its blooms later in the season. Down here, I planted a lot of Monarda that I picked up from Lowe's on the clearance rack. It was on clearance simply because it's been bloomed out, so I need to come and cut it back so it'll produce some new blooms, but there was nothing wrong with it. I got each one of these $4 a piece. Monarda's pretty drought tolerant. It's one of the reasons I stuck it here, and I'm excited to see what it'll do. Back here I found another clearance plant, which was that peach sky yarrow that I mentioned in the back. And for any reason, I don't know why it was on sale on clearance. It was still in good shape. It does have a little brown foliage down there, but pick you up clearance plants. Go during lunch, take work off and go during your lunch and find plants at Lowe's. That's a great time to see before anybody gets off work, and go to the garden center and pick them. You get there first. It's a great option to add things to your garden very cheaply. I think this was like $5, and it's gorgeous yarrow. This is a hydrangea from Proven Winners called Firelight. It's a beautiful hydrangea that gets quite large. I've stuck it on the side of the house here. I don't know how big it will get. It gets a little bit of light. This is the south side, but it is kind of shrouded here under this tree. But it produces its color much earlier than other paniculata hydrangeas, so it'll turn pink earlier in the season. This one's been here a couple years as well. It did not do great the first year. I bought it as a really small one. But it's finally looking great this year. I'm really excited about my hydrangeas this year in the garden. This is a Cheyenne Sky grass. We have more Gara. This is more Monarda, but this is Pardon My Pink. The other one was Pardon My Plum, I believe. We have some fern under here. Crested Surf is the name from Proven Winners. We have some General Sedum here. This is the Autumn Joy variety, I believe. Just the typical one that gets the pinkish seed heads. And then this rose is Desdemona by David Alston. It's completely budded up again, so it's a really good rebloomer if you're looking for a reblooming rose. It smells excellent, and it has nice little white flowers on it, pink white. They do not tend to damage as easily as the Tranquility Rose does. Under here we have variegated monkey grass, is basically what we've always called it. And someone was asking about that in the video. This come from 2 clumps, everything in this bed, so it goes all the way around there. And you can actually see, don't put monkey grass where you don't want it, because this is where I dug it up almost 4 years ago, and there was none in that spot, and it's regrowing from roots that seemingly didn't exist when I dug it up. So if you always want it in a spot, that's great, but if you don't, that could be a problem. This is a Lemon Daddy hydrangea, picked up from discount last year. It's a Macrophylla variety. It doesn't like the sun it's getting here. I may completely remove it, or I may move it back under the willow, since the willow's casting so much shade now. It might be a great accent plant there. I don't love Macrophyllas. This isn't a reblooming variety, and a lot of Macrophyllas do not rebloom. A lot of the newer ones do, which is great, and I'm going to be adding those to my garden to test them out. But this one in particular doesn't rebloom, so our winters would typically kill the blooms, and then I wouldn't have any. And so it's a great foliage accent, but I will probably be removing it. Here we have a tiny Bobo hydrangea I added, some coneflower, lots of daylilies. Here's an interesting one that I don't know the name of. It was a bonus daylily in one of the orders I got. Lamb's ear here, wee white hydrangea. This is a smooth variety that only gets around 2 foot tall and wide. This is a Crimson Queen Japanese maple. This is the Sunshine Yarrow that I was mentioning. Absolutely gorgeous yellow bloom here in front of the house. So we continue around. We have another wee white hydrangea. My phlox has bloomed out, but it's putting on some rebloom right now. I have not had phlox in my garden before. This is the only variety I have, and so I'm considering shearing it back, but I kind of like the way the seed heads look. So I'm going to think about it. I may just trim off the seed heads to see if I get some more rebloom, but we'll go from there. My lavender hedge is looking awesome, and if you've never thought about putting in a lavender hedge, I would recommend it simply because the pollinators love it. This time of day, most of the pollinators are retiring. It's 8:30 at night, but normally it's covered up with bees during the day, which is excellent. You can see I have my bubblegum supertunias are doing excellent. My fireworks grass that I have in here, I had to move the supertunias back a little bit the other day to get it some light because they were completely taking over. These are more millennium alliums, which I talked about in the back around the rose. We have an at-last rose here, which is not doing great. I mentioned in my last garden tour, I think it's because of the blue spruce back there. The roots run all throughout this bed, or it could be the soil. I have no idea, but everything else in the bed is pretty much thriving, and it's not. So I may consider moving it at the end of the season somewhere else in the garden. This is a ornamental mint by Proven Winners. I think it's new this year. It was actually on clearance and I got it for $5. I don't know the name of it though. There's a beautiful variegated ajuga down here. And then we have a weigela and then another butterfly bush. So as we go this way, we have my walkway here, which is full of winter gem boxwood. Then we have the creeping jenny, which I think is a nice contrast to the boxwood, and these mahogany monster heuchera, which I added last year. If you want to see the containers with the Proven Winners Supertunia Bordeaux, they're looking great. They're a little behind this year because we had a later freeze than usual and I didn't get to plant them as early as I usually do. I believe these heucheras are called hopscotch. My garden tour is a little late and I didn't get another one in June, or you would have got to see the beautiful astilbe. That is a typical gorgeous pink color. It will put on a little more blooms, but typically it's bloomed out, but creates just a great structure in the garden for the rest of the season. We have a primo black pearl heuchera, and these are the geraniums I grew from seed. I have a video on how I planted those up and how I started them from seed. This is Tiny Tough Stuff Hydrangea, which is a beautiful lace cap, reblooming. Hydrangea serrata is the name of the species. And it has, as you can see, these beautiful florets here that attract pollinators and have dainty little flowers out to the side. And it is just loaded up this year. These roses are mango salsa roses by Proven Winners. These are new this year in my garden, so they had their bloom really early, but it is already covered up and new flower buds. I'll be getting another flush of roses here soon. Here's a good idea of the color of those. It's very, very similar to the color of the geraniums I have planted here that I grew from seed, and that's one of the reasons I love it. This daisy I grew from seed. I do not know the variety, but it is wonderful out here in the garden. I did have to tie it up because it's gotten so large, but the blooms are just these frilly little things that just add a lot of interest to this area, and I love. We have more sprinter boxwoods here. People are starting to shoot fireworks, so if you can hear that, I'm recording this on July 3rd and it's almost 8:30 at night and people are getting excited for the 4th. My moss here is looking good. It's spreading very well. This is Irish and Scottish moss that I picked up from a big box store. This may be its 3rd year. And so I'm going to start pulling up some of the more chartreuse moss and moving it to the other walking path I have on the other side of the garden here. This is another sprinter boxwood. This is Boogie Woogie sedum if you were interested. I would like it to fill in this area. I don't know if it gets enough sun to do that, but we're going to give it a try. We have a Gara, and this is an update on the basket that I planted with 22 annuals in it. So you can see the verbena is finally blooming. The Supertunia Royal Velvet is putting on some new growth. Everything is looking really great. I gave it a nice fertilizer feed, and it's starting to fill out. We still got a lot of way to grow. All of these plants were clearance plants. I will put a link below to the video where I planted all of these up, but give it maybe another more month and this will be looking awesome. This container itself is called a Pamela Crawford border upright container or something to that effect. And you can pick them up online. I'll put a link below where I got it from. This is 𝗟𝗏 as well by the same breeder, but this is her yellow version of the double classic. Various cone flowers around here, white and purple. And this is my hosta bed, which I showed previously. The hostas are looking great. I'm really excited about how this bed looks in general this year. It's about time to start dividing some of the hostas, but they are just coming along nicely. I have some more black mondo grass down here that I need to plant up, and some more dwarf mondo grass, which I will probably fill in some of these areas around the hostas. In the back here, we have a rose called Roald Dahl. It nearly got obliterated by beetles or some other bug that was eating on it. I've since treated it and that has stopped. I did get some blooms on it, but it's completely bloomed out at this point. I picked up another pink lemonade baptisia from the garden center the other day that was on sale. You can see how small they are in their first year. This one was probably on clearance because it's especially small, but next year it will be probably as big as the ones I showed you around the patio. So I'm super excited to just add some nice airy foliage that will come up to about the height of where that rose on standard is, and it'll provide nice spring color in this area and just a great foliage to kind of hide that corner of the porch. So this is a blue chiffon hibiscus on standard, or Rose of Sharon. It's loaded up with blooms. It'll start blooming here in the next month or so too. There is the hydrangea that I rescued from my clay soil out front, the Invincible Ruby. It's doing much better. I gave it some root fertilizer and kept its water to a minimum, and the leaves have perked back up. I trimmed off all the blooms. Someone was asking if that's what we should do. Yes, you want to trim off all the blooms, and I'm going to wait until it starts pushing some new growth. I have not got the clay soil issue resolved yet over there. I'll show you what it looks like today. But I'm hoping to be able to do that in the next week or so, and then address getting that replanted after it starts putting on some new growth, so I know it's happy. This is another container I did. It's just got a purple salvia in here from Proven Winners, and then Super Tunia bubblegum. It's a little more leggy in this area. It gets more shade, but it's still absolutely filling this container. So this is only one salvia. You can see how big that is. And I believe there are 2 or 3 bubblegums in here. So these aren't quite as big as the other container, but they were planted at the same time. But that'll give you an indication of how light will affect their growth. This plant right here is actually a goldenrod. It's supposed to be a dwarf version. It's getting quite tall, and I think it's simply stretching for light, but it'll be a nice foliage here. I may have to move that elsewhere in the garden if it's stretching that bad, but we'll leave it this year and see how it does. I have various hostas around here. This is a continuation of the wee white hydrangeas that I showed you over there. So it's hosta hydrangea, all the way around until my 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 hedge meets back up around here where I started the tour. But before we end this, I'm going to show you the front garden bed and show you all the varieties I have in here. So most of the varieties in here are hosta. I've got lots of hosta. This one's called June. It's a little more blue. And then I believe we have Sun Gold or Sun Drop or something like that, and it's a little more chartreuse leaf. I've got some coleus in here just for color in this area. It's finally taking off and putting on a bit of growth. I'm excited about that. These are bloom-struck hydrangeas that I picked up from Home Depot last fall. They were almost completely dead. I was able to talk them down and get a discount. And I brought them home and they recovered and they look beautiful this year. They need to put on some more growth. You can tell that they were sick plants last year because they're not completely full. They have some spaces missing in them. But you generally, if you're recovering plants from a big box store, need to give them at least a good 2 years to fully see a recovery. But I just love the blooms on these. Mine are pink. You can see I've got some purple in here a little bit. I did throw down some sulfur to try and make these purple, but to the extent my soil is so alkaline, it's very hard to make blooms purple. So this is the hole. As you can see, still holding water. And so I've got to figure out how to resolve that, and I'm not quite done that yet. So follow along, like, subscribe, see how I resolve that issue, and hopefully that will be in the next 2 weeks. This container has 𝗟𝗂𝗏 hosta and Supertunia Bordeaux in there. It was kind of a last minute throw together. I had purchased these 𝗟𝗂𝗏 hosta specifically to put in here. I had Italian ice roses from Proven Winners in these containers over winter, and they did not love it. They died almost completely back, and I actually had to rescue them, and they're recovering in containers now as well. And then I had this extra Supertunia Bordeaux that I had picked up from the garden center, so I placed them in these containers, and I really like the combination. The Bordeaux is putting on a lot of growth and looks really great. We have a Japanese forest grass. I believe this is the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 variety. I'm not sure which one it is, but it's the more yellow variety. And then we just have a row of hostas here. This is another hedge of sprinter boxwoods. You can see these actually were not 4-inch containers. I got these as gallons, so they would be a little bigger. And honestly, probably could have done just as well with the 4-inch containers, because the amount of growth the 4-inch containers have put on in the same period, they've almost caught up with these. So that'll give you a good indication of how quickly those sprinter boxwoods grow. We have Invincible Ruby hydrangeas, which are beautiful and add a lot of color to this bed. This is Sun King Aurelia, which is a great shade shrub. It'll get 3 foot tall and wide. It does not bloom, but it has this great yellow chartreuse foliage to bring a lot of color in a dark area of your garden. We'll continue along this way. This is more of the Supertunia Bordeaux with the 𝗟𝗏𝗏 hosta. This is a lemony lace elderberry that I planted here. It kind of looks like a Japanese maple, which I really love. And it has a nice foliage. I think it's getting less sun here, so the foliage is a little darker than it would typically be. Typically it would be a little more bright yellow, like this right here. This is an Empress Wu hosta, which is the original hosta to the 𝗟𝗏𝗏. So the 𝗟𝗏𝗏 that I have in the containers back here will get very large if you give them enough water. This is basically the mother of that plant. It is the biggest hosta known to man. And given enough water and love, it will get absolutely massive in your garden. This one is, I believe, 3 years old. So they do take a while. I have one right here that I got. If you can find it already bigger, that's great. This was a bigger one, and I got another one the same year that was a little smaller. Well guys, if you made it this far in the video, congratulations. If you like and subscribe, I have a surprise coming in the next week that's super exciting for me, and I hope is super exciting for y'all. Happy 4th, and thank you for joining me in my garden tour. People are starting to shoot fireworks, so I hope y'all have a great 4th of July, and I will see you soon. And remember, in a world full of hate, be a light. Bye everyone.